Introducing the Bishop domed router mount and its partner in crime, the Cowl dust collection hood. Hey there, it's Chris from Good Roads, and I am so excited to finally be able to share these tools with you. They've been in development for a long time, and I cannot wait, and I am so excited to get them into your hands. The Bishop is a domed mount for your trim router that you can use to easily round the edges of your skateboard blanks or really any other curved woodworking project. And the Cowl is a dust collection hood for a flush cut router table setup. These two tools make an excellent addition to any board shaping setup, and they're available right now at goodroadscollective.com. So let me tell you a little bit about the development of these tools and what it took to get them into what I think is a really good spot, and then I can show you how they work. Let's start with the Bishop. I'd seen handmade versions of this type of router jig in other board builders' shops, and it seemed like such an awesome solution to the problem of how to quickly round the edges of a blank. I have a 3D printer, so I designed and printed this first jig for myself to see if a printed version of the tool would suffice. And I needed to start getting a feel for working with the style of domed guide because I had never used one before. The first version came out great. It seemed to be plenty strong, and the response from the board building community was amazingly positive. Seeing how enthusiastic y'all were about this got me really excited to develop it into a fully fleshed out product. So I went through many iterations. Bit by bit, I refined the design for strength, utility, and printability. Once I had settled on a final design, I also put a ton of effort into fine-tuning my print settings to ensure that the jigs would be strong and robust. And here we are at the final product. Let me show you how it works. You mount the guide to your workbench using the 4 included screws. For 3D printed tools like this, I've got to recommend that you screw the parts in place carefully. I did a bunch of work to make sure they're as strong as possible, but over-tightening your screws can cause the parts to crack. It's just one of the unfortunate trappings of 3D printed plastic. Just be careful. Next, grab your router and roundover bit. The Bishop was designed around this Colt router by Bosch, and it should work with any router with a 2 3/4 inch or 70mm diameter. The clamping mechanism has some flex to it, so there's a little wiggle room on the sizing. Slide your router into the jig and clamp it in place by tightening down the bolt. Once everything is placed, take your freshly cut deck planks and run it through the jig to round your rails. Be very careful to keep your hands well clear of the bit, don't wear baggy clothing, and tie back any long hair. An exposed bit like this is one of the more dangerous things you can have in a wood shop, so take the proper safety precautions. And just like that, you got nicely rounded rails ready for sanding. The Cowl is a bit of a different story because while I knew the Bishop had potential to be a product, it never even really occurred to me that a dust collection hood could be too. I made it for myself and didn't expect anybody to want one of their own. Was I ever wrong? Again, the interest from the community was wonderfully encouraging. So I had another product to develop, and when I started iterating on my initial design, the first thing that had to go was this top bearing guide. It's a good idea in theory, but when I went to turn on my router table, having all that metal so close to my flush cut bit made me really worried. All it would take is one little accident and the bolt could crash into the bit, which would hurl metal at high speeds all around my shop. That, mixed with the fact that I don't really see myself using a top guide template, meant that I could redesign the intake with safety in mind. I went through a bunch of iterations to get the proportions and print settings right, and I'm really happy with what I came up with. The design is sleek and functional. The angle of the opening of the intake lets you steer your deck blank around the router bit. And it still retains the concept of that protective guide from the first version, but importantly, if for any reason the bit crashes into the dust collector, it'll just chew up plastic, which is much safer than having metal collide with metal. I am so stoked with how these two pieces of equipment came out. I've been putting the prototypes of the Bishop through heavy work, and I'm so happy with how it functions, and I'm so relieved to finally have a fast, easy way to round the edges of my deck. Compared to all the ways that I've done it in the past, it's quicker, it's simpler, it means you have to spend a lot less time at the sanding drum. I am really proud of this tool, and I feel like it's a design that I can stand behind. As for the Cowl, I designed it with functionality in mind, but I love the way it came out. It looks like some kind of golden age superhero costume. And for someone who never really had dust collection in my shop, my God, does it make cleanup so much easier. And it's much nicer on the old post-nasal cavity, even with a mask. I put a ton of work into these designs, and being able to use them in my shop has been so gratifying, and I have been looking forward to this release for a long time. So, both of them are available right now at goodroadscollective.com. I've got a small stock ready to go, and once that stock is depleted, they're gonna be print on demand, so just be aware that there'll be a small lead time in the future, but you really won't have to wait that long. When I was trying to figure out my pricing, I took a look at some of the print on demand services, and every one that I found wanted more than $100 per part. Guys, in addition to all the hard work that I put into tuning the print settings so that these parts would be nice and strong and robust, something that you wouldn't really have control over with an online printing service, I think we can do much better than that on the price. So, the Cowl is going to be $30 US, and the Bishop is going to be $60, and that's because this part is almost entirely solid and it takes a very long time to print. That's both of these tools for less than the price of what you'd be charged if you went to an online service to print it, and in addition to that, I'm going to be including the hardware. So I think it's a pretty good deal, and hey, if you're on a budget, for a limited time, I've got some of the prints that I used, some of the versions of these parts that I used to dial in my settings, available at a discount over on the website, because while they're perfectly functional, they're strong enough, they're robust enough to do the job, they're a little ugly. So if you don't mind some minor blemishes, that might be a way to get yourself one of these tools for a little bit less. Additionally, if you've got a 3D printer of your own, all the print files for these are available on goodroadscollective.com, and they're free to all of my supporters on Patreon. Those files have already been uploaded, guys. If you want to grab them, they're there. You won't reap all the benefits of the R&D that I did on print settings, but you'll be able to make some of these tools for yourself, and you'll still be supporting me and Good Roads, the company. So that would be pretty sweet. So that's going to be it for this one. The Bishop router mount, the Cowl dust collector, a dynamic duo of router-based board building efficiency, available now. Thanks for checking it out. I hope you dig it. Thanks for coming along with the ride. We'll be back to more board building projects next week. I love having you along. So until next time, I'll see you soon. Good enough. Good enough. I hope you recorded the whole thing. You did. Very good. That's a good camera. That's a good camera. Yes, yes, yes. The Bishop was designed around this Bosch. Can I split the difference? Bosch? I'm gonna go with Bosch, and if it's wrong, y'all can laugh at me down in the comments. It'll be fine.